The young director looked at the elderly man in the waiting room and said, "Show us what you can do, old-timer." He had no idea he was talking to Dean Martin, and what happened next became Hollywood legend, proving that talent recognizes no age limits, and arrogance always comes before a fall. It was Tuesday morning, March 15th, 1966, at Paramount Studios in Hollywood, and the casting office for The Silencers was buzzing with the controlled chaos of a major motion picture audition. The film was Dean Martin's latest Matt Helm spy adventure, and director Phil Carlson was looking for supporting actors to fill various roles in what was expected to be another box office hit. But Phil Carlson wasn't running this particular audition. He was in New York, handling publicity for the film's upcoming release, which meant that the day's casting session was being supervised by his 25-year-old assistant director, Bradley Morrison. Morrison was a recent USC Film School graduate who had landed his position through family connections rather than experience, and he approached his temporary authority with the kind of aggressive confidence that often accompanies unearned responsibility. Morrison was tall, well-dressed in the latest Hollywood fashion, and carried himself with the cocky assurance of someone who believed that youth and education were more valuable than experience and talent. He had strong opinions about what modern audiences wanted to see, dismissive attitudes toward older performers whom he considered has-beens, and an unshakable belief that he represented the future of American cinema. The waiting room was filled with actors of various ages who had come to audition for small but potentially memorable roles in the film. There were young character actors hoping for their big break, established performers looking for steady work, and several older actors who had been working in Hollywood since the 1940s, but were finding fewer opportunities as the industry shifted toward younger stars and contemporary themes. Among the waiting actors was a man in his late 50s who looked unremarkable compared to the other hopefuls. He wore a simple gray suit that was well-tailored but not flashy, a white shirt, and a conservative tie. His hair was perfectly styled, but not elaborately so, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who was comfortable in his own skin, but didn't feel the need to project that comfort aggressively. What none of the other actors in the waiting room realized was that they were sitting next to Dean Martin, the star of the very film they were auditioning for. Dean had stopped by the studio to discuss script changes with Phil Carlson, had discovered that his director was in New York, and had decided to observe the casting session to see what kinds of actors were being considered for the supporting roles. Dean was wearing sunglasses and had deliberately dressed down for his visit, partly because he enjoyed the occasional opportunity to move through Hollywood without being recognized, and partly because he was curious about how the industry treated actors when they didn't know they were dealing with a major star. Bradley Morrison emerged from the casting room around 10:30 a.m., clipboard in hand, ready to begin the day's auditions. He surveyed the waiting room with the appraising look of someone who was used to making quick judgments about people based on their appearance and his own preconceptions about what constituted marketable talent. "All right, everyone," Morrison announced, his voice carrying the authority he felt his position entitled him to. "I'm going to be honest with you. This is 1966, and audiences want to see fresh faces, contemporary energy, performers who understand what modern entertainment means. We're not looking for yesterday's stars or old-fashioned approaches to acting." Several of the older actors in the room shifted uncomfortably, understanding that Morrison was essentially telling them they were wasting their time. Dean, however, remained perfectly still, watching the young director with the kind of calm attention that suggested he was more amused than offended by what he was hearing. Morrison's eyes swept the room and landed on Dean, who was sitting quietly in the corner, apparently lost in thought. "You," Morrison said, pointing directly at Dean. "Yes, you, in the gray suit. What exactly are you doing here?" Dean looked up, his expression mild and curious. "I'm here for the audition, same as everyone else." Morrison's tone carried a mixture of condescension and impatience. "Sir, I don't know who told you to come here today, but this is a casting call for a contemporary spy film. We're looking for actors who can bring energy and relevance to modern roles. I'm not sure this is the right project for someone of your generation." A few of the younger actors in the room exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable with Morrison's rudeness, others apparently enjoying the spectacle of an older performer being put in his place. Dean's response was perfectly calm. "What kind of energy and relevance are you looking for?" Morrison sighed, as if explaining basic concepts to someone who couldn't be expected to understand them. "Look, mister," he paused, waiting for Dean to provide his name. "Martin," Dean said simply. Morrison continued without recognizing the name or connecting it to the star of the film he was supposedly helping to cast. "Mr. Martin, modern audiences want to see performers who understand contemporary culture, who can deliver dialogue with the kind of natural, relaxed style that feels authentic to people who actually live in 1966. They don't want theatrical, old-fashioned acting that belongs in movies from 20 years ago." Dean nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And you don't think someone my age could deliver dialogue with a natural, relaxed style?" "Frankly, no," Morrison replied with the brutal honesty of someone who believed his opinion was both important and correct. "I think actors of your generation learned techniques that worked for audiences in the 1940s and 1950s, but those approaches feel dated now. Today's audiences want something more spontaneous, more effortless." The room had gone completely quiet. Every actor present was watching this exchange with fascination and growing discomfort. Some recognized that Morrison was being unnecessarily cruel to an older performer who was simply trying to work, but none of them felt confident enough to intervene. Dean stood up from his chair, his movement unhurried and graceful. "Would you like me to show you what I can do?" he asked. "Maybe demonstrate whether I can deliver dialogue with a natural, relaxed style?" Morrison's expression suggested that he was dealing with someone who didn't understand how hopeless his situation was, but who deserved to learn the lesson as clearly as possible. "You know what? Sure. Let's see what you've got, Mr. Martin. Show us what someone of your generation considers natural and contemporary." Morrison gestured toward the center of the waiting room, creating an impromptu audition space surrounded by the other actors, who were now functioning as an unwilling audience. "Here's the situation," Morrison continued, pulling out a script page. "You're a sophisticated man at a cocktail party, and you're trying to charm an attractive woman. Give me 30 seconds of dialogue that shows me you understand how modern people actually talk and behave." Dean walked to the center of the room with the same easy confidence he brought to everything. But there was something different about his posture now, something that suggested Morrison had unknowingly awakened something that had been lying dormant. "Do you want me to use the script, or should I improvise?" Dean asked. "Improvise," Morrison said dismissively. "Show me what natural contemporary dialogue sounds like from someone your age." What happened next would be talked about in Hollywood casting offices for decades. Dean Martin began to perform, and immediately the atmosphere in the room changed completely. His voice carried the same warm, intimate quality that had made millions of people feel like his personal friend. His posture was relaxed but confident, his gestures natural but purposeful, and his entire presence radiated the kind of effortless charisma that couldn't be taught or faked. He created an entire scene out of nothing, playing both sides of a conversation between a sophisticated man and an attractive woman at a cocktail party. His dialogue was witty, contemporary, and delivered with such perfect timing that several of the actors in the room found themselves smiling despite the tension of the situation. But more than that, Dean was demonstrating exactly the kind of natural, relaxed performing style that Morrison claimed modern audiences wanted to see. Every word was delivered as if it was occurring to him spontaneously. Every gesture looked unplanned, and the entire performance felt like authentic human behavior rather than acting. For 30 seconds, Dean Martin transformed the Paramount casting office into the most sophisticated cocktail party in Hollywood, inhabited by a man who was charming, funny, and completely at ease with himself and the world around him. When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Morrison stared at Dean with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been quietly but completely revised. The other actors looked between Dean and Morrison, waiting to see how the young director would respond to what they had all recognized as a masterful demonstration of exactly what he claimed he was looking for. "That was," Morrison began, then stopped, apparently unable to find words that adequately described what he had just witnessed. Dean returned to his chair with the same unhurried grace he had shown throughout the encounter. "Was that the kind of natural, contemporary style you were looking for?" Dean asked, his tone carrying no trace of triumph or vindication. Before Morrison could answer, the casting room door opened and Phil Carlson's secretary emerged. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "I just got a call from Mr. Carlson in New York. He wanted me to remind you that Mr. Martin might be stopping by today to observe the auditions, and that you should make sure he's comfortable and has everything he needs." Morrison looked confused. "Mr. Martin is here? Where?" The secretary looked around the waiting room, and her eyes landed on Dean, who gave her a small wave. "Hello, Catherine," Dean said. "How's Phil doing in New York?" The secretary smiled warmly. "He's doing fine, Mr. Martin. He said to tell you the script changes look good, and he'll call you this evening." Morrison's face went through several color changes as the realization hit him. He had just spent 10 minutes lecturing Dean Martin about contemporary acting techniques, had dismissed him as an over-the-hill has-been, and had condescendingly asked him to prove he could deliver dialogue with a natural, relaxed style. Dean Martin, whose natural, relaxed style had made him one of the biggest stars in the world. Dean Martin, who was the star of the film Morrison was helping to cast. Dean Martin, who could end Morrison's career with a single phone call to the studio executives. "Mr. Martin," Morrison said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea. I didn't recognize." Dean stood up and walked over to Morrison, and for a moment, the young director looked like he was about to faint. "Bradley," Dean said, his voice carrying the same warmth that had shone throughout the entire encounter. "You don't need to apologize for not recognizing me. But you might want to think about treating all actors with a little more respect, regardless of who they are or how old they are." Dean paused, making sure he had Morrison's complete attention. "Every person in this room has something to offer. Every one of them has experiences, skills, and perspectives that could make your film better. When you dismiss people based on their age or your assumptions about what audiences want, you're not protecting your film's quality. You're limiting it." Dean looked around the waiting room at the other actors, who were watching this lesson in humility and professional respect with obvious appreciation. "The truth is, Bradley, audiences don't care how old an actor is or what generation they learn their craft in. They care about whether that actor can make them believe in the story, whether they can make them laugh or cry or forget their troubles for a couple of hours." Morrison nodded, understanding that he was receiving the most valuable education of his young career. "Now," Dean continued, "why don't we start these auditions over? And this time, let's see what everyone can do before we decide who's right for what." The rest of the auditions proceeded very differently than Morrison had planned. Instead of dismissing older actors or lecturing people about contemporary techniques, he listened to what each performer had to offer. Several actors who might have been dismissed based on age or appearance ended up being cast in significant roles. Years later, when Bradley Morrison had become a successful director in his own right, he would always tell the story of the day Dean Martin taught him the most important lesson about filmmaking: that talent comes in every package, and that the greatest mistake you can make is assuming you know what people are capable of before you give them a chance to show you. If this story of humility, respect, and recognizing talent regardless of age inspired you, Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to know that true professionals treat everyone with dignity, and that assumptions about people based on their appearance can blind you to extraordinary ability. Have you ever been surprised by someone's hidden talents? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the moments when arrogance meets genuine greatness.